Now I'll begin the tale, and it'll be well worth the telling. Diana's life was getting worse by the minute. Not that it had ever been perfect to start off with. She was a skinny little girl child, but that was nothing to brag about. Her mother had died some 12 years ago, but at 14, she barely felt the sting of that loss. She lived alone mostly over at Old Hill House. Daddy had bought it when she was 3. Hill House and all the hills around it. Something about it being picturesque and soothing. Diana was sitting now in her modified treehouse, swatting at her long black hair to keep it away from her face. She tried to remember a time when this place hadn't felt like home. Her daddy had helped her find this tree. It was a beautiful oak tree at the very top of the tallest hill on his land. He hadn't built the tree house or put the swing up, but he had designed it and made sure that somebody who could came in and did it for her. This oak was over 200 years old. At least that's what the man had said. Said you could tell on account of how the bottom branches had started to burrow back into the earth. The tree had practically made itself into a dome, glimpsing nature and yet protecting itself from the winds. And right now, her little hilltop was the only thing above water. Diana didn't know what had happened or how. She had run off to be by herself, away from Nanny and the hover of the house staff. Her cell phone had died hours ago. She had no way to contact her father in New York. No way to call 911. No way to find out what had gone wrong. What Diana didn't know was that the polar ice caps had melted. Louisiana and Florida were gone. Most of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia were as well. The coastal states all lost about half of their landmass, making the coast look so very, very different. The cause is still unknown. Maybe global warming hit an all-new high, or maybe the stars lined up just right. Or maybe the League of Shadows finally succeeded in one of their plans. Either way, the world was new again. When daylight finally came, Diana went to the water's edge just to think. So many questions buzzed in her head. Why had Daddy gone back to New York? He had a satellite office. Couldn't he have managed it from there? The house. She couldn't even see the house. Only the mountains in the distance and a few scant hilltops peeked from above the deluge. Were they all dead? Was everyone gone? She heard them before she saw them. It sounded like muted singing, as though her head were stuffed into pillows while an opera was happening around her. Then one of them splashed at her feet. She looked down at the passing water, and it wasn't her own pale blue eyes staring back up at her. The girl thing, whatever it was almost completely submerged below water. Her nose and below were completely submerged, but her keen copper eyes were staring right up at Diana. A webbed hand was emerging from the tide, heading right for her leg. Diana screeched and scurried backwards, nearly tripping on one of the burrowing branches behind her. The girl in the water looked offended. She submerged, and Diana gasped when she saw a large dorsal fin. She'd gone mad. That was the only explanation. There's no such things as mermaids. There's no such things as mermaids, she murmured over and over to herself as she hugged her knees. Offensive, said someone. A man's voice? Where? Another splash brought her attention back to the waterline. Fish Girl had come back with 2 other fish friends. One was an older girl, and the other was a middle-aged boy fish, or at least he looked like a middle-aged man. Come, he said, motioning for her to come closer. And she shook her head violently, slamming her forehead against her knees. Mermaids aren't real, she whispered frantically. Worse things than us in this world, he announced, his eyes narrowed. Come, we'll help you. Diana peeked up at them, but she shook her head again. I don't swim well. You'll hurt me. Why would we? The older girl asked. Bad things happen when people trust the Fae folk, she wailed, nearly burrowing into herself again. She's not coming with us, a voice said sadly. She won't come with us. We aren't leaving her here to die, the manfish announced firmly. There was a flurry of sloshing before the sound of the water gently lapping at the land returned. It merged into the sound around as nature's silence. Long minutes passed, and Diana had all the time in the world to think and fret. Should she have trusted them? She wasn't a strong swimmer. She couldn't stay here, though. She had snacks, personal things in her treehouse, but that wouldn't last long. Collapsing in on herself would do no good. She couldn't just sit still any longer. Okay, time to evaluate. What did she need? Survival, obviously. But survival was a day-to-day thing. It wasn't something that she could just do and have for the rest of her days. She looked down at herself. She had her black and white Converse on, her underclothes, which consisted of a white undershirt and some bizarre purple and green striped leggings. And over that was an off-the-shoulder Beatles shirt with a knee-length black skirt. Comfy, but not ideal for survival. She'd hurried up the tree and scavenged through her treehouse. She stuffed her phone, iPod, and charger, along with all the snacks that she could find, into her purse. It looked like a tiny backpack, which was great, kept it out of the way. She looked around and realized that she was surrounded by wood. Is that the type of wood that would float? After a lot of struggling, she managed to kick the door to her treehouse down and drag it to the water's edge. Then she watched with sorrow as it kept sinking into the water. It's good to see that you'll at least try to help yourself. That merman's voice startled her, but she was too depressed to be really scared. Help us out here. This thing is heavy. When she looked his way, she realized there was a large metallic thing in the water. The merfolk were struggling with it as they tried to bring it up to the land. A boat! Diana cried, trotting into the water. She dragged the boat onto land and flipped it over so that the water could drain away. There was no signs of holes, but there was no signs of oars either. We found this monstrosity along the bottom. Not 1 league west of here, the merman replied. There are no oars to paddle with, Diana replied. No, but there's a small rope on the front, a tiny voice said. It was only then that Diana noticed that there were 3 more merfolk in the company, 2 boys and a tiny little girl. Please let us help you, the first merman entreated. Diana put the boat back into the water right side up. She strapped her purse to her back, got into the boat, and tossed the rope overboard. Okay, I need to go north. The merman nodded. There's a safe place not far from here. We'll take you there and see if we can get help along the way. Diana sat down as the merfolk slid back into the water. There was a moment of awkward floating before a gentle tug, and then the rope became taut, and Diana had to brace herself. She had a feeling it would be a long time before she could really relax. And now, Diana's fate rests in your hands.